she's going to wrap up with some comments today before we move to our concluding remarks. Tony, thank you very much and welcome to
So first of all, Kate, thank you very much and congratulations for putting this event on, and I think that needs a And Tony, yes, thank you. We in government do try and do our part, and it was important for us to actually have a good understanding, or as good an understanding as we could have, about the role for us to get our act together and looking at what we need to do to be ready to adopt the technology and look at a more consistent approach. So again, I think not just talking about it, but actively doing something about planning and implementation, and so we could be in a much more cohesive arrangement. Too often I think it's talk and not a lot of action. So again, to a lot of you who are active in this area, open source is important to government, standards are important to government. We are not only there embellishing or requiring international-based standards. We have a lot of standards across government. Our real key area, though, is to ensure that we have interoperability of our systems to be able to provide services. And not surprisingly, coming from the department, the bigger department that I'm in, it is really also looking at how we use taxpayers' monies most effectively in terms of the way in which we invest in technology. Important around that, though, is not just layering more levels and levels of technology. We have to understand how we are moving from our legacy environments as we adopt new technologies and or expose any of our business processes back into the broader community so they can be embedded in the natural systems. The natural systems for commercial products that we would then consume as part of our overall arrangements. So again, we have, as Pia and Jeff had indicated before and other speakers, done a fair amount of work in government, and perhaps part of the issue is we don't do enough of the showcasing of what we have actually done or where we have this deployed. And there are a wide array of different departments, agencies who have adopted open software, open and not necessarily free, which is an important other recognition. Again, colleagues from Geosciences Australia, you've been pioneers in a whole range of areas. Bureau of Met, again, very significant environment, world stage. Australia does very significant work in this, and we influence international communities. Our service delivery agencies, major service delivery agencies, Centrelink and the Tax Office and others, they also have been early explorers and adapters and adopters of this technology. Not so much of it is at the end user point, i.e. either in the desktop environments, but there has been a lot of work looking through the network, servers and other areas. And importantly for my office, we try and capture that information, capture that learning, showcase that where we can, involve industry in that process so that we build a greater peer knowledge and share that information more broadly. And we would like to continue to do that. So for those of you who are in this broader community, keep working with us. We encourage that and we look forward to your very active participation. We do a lot of work not just at the federal government scene, but also my colleagues in the other jurisdictions, primarily at the state government level. And colleagues in the South Australian government, WA government and others work with us to look at other opportunities where we can get greater standardisation. And again, I think we've heard in the previous presentations, it takes a large amount of effort to get that cross-government, pan-government adoption standardisation. So stick with us, help us and support us in doing that. I think importantly, as part of our learning, we have done survey work with our departments and agencies to really try and see what the issues are that they are experiencing as they either do implementations, move environments to have a greater level of standardisation. We did work through last year, building on some of our early 2005 guidance. We put a summary of the outcomes of that, and there are important messages in there, and it's available on the website, our website, so you can have a look at it. But there are important messages in there about what it will take to both gain greater confidence from our departments and our agencies, our technologists, as well as our business people in moving more and embracing open more. Some of that is about either the perception or the reality of the level of support that is there when we do move to an implementation. And again, this is part of a transition as we are moving either from what we experience in proprietary service offerings compared to a different world where we are looking to have perhaps for a period of time a higher level of support as we introduce more open source, open-based products. Really important. This is about, again, establishing levels of confidence and reliability, both in traditional terms as you would interpret that, as well as more contemporary. So again, we would want to see ways in which we can respond, ways in which industry and other partners in the industry who are passionate about this and who are either deploying or presenting information to government in that regard. You touched, a number of speakers touched on policy making issues or touched on procurement issues in presentations through the day. Informed neutrality has been the position of the government, not only the Australian government, but a number of other governments. And to get to an informed neutrality also means about having good information out there about what real implementation is about what real issues are out there to be able to give that level of confidence. So we will continue to look for those areas that have good products fit for purpose and look at the full life cycle costs, because I think that's a particularly important aspect of however we do our investment strategies as well. So it's not just about component parts, but a full transitional full life cycle cost. And again, they're experiences that we'll draw off across our departments and agencies. It was really interesting looking at the spatial data presentation that was here today as well. And there's, again, I think a lot of opportunity across government to extend on that. And I know my colleagues in WA government are looking at it both at the local area for planning purposes, but other service delivery purposes. And it has meaning. People can understand what this is when it's related to something that's important to them. Where will they be able to have a new development, residential development or the like? What are the services that are going to be there? How do we embrace it and have it available for enriching a community and having a community involvement and an input both into policy as well as the decision making? Exciting things. I just thought I'd take this opportunity also to indicate that I think the media also has a particularly important role in what it does to help articulate what's happening across government or in various environments. And it can be a bit disappointing to see some misleading comments, which are things like an interpretation that open source is banned in government. It's factually incorrect. And that's a very important part in recognising that our CIOs do seriously look at and investigate and do thorough analysis. And they're not saying that they're not adopting it, but they are saying where they can find either enterprise-wide solutions that they'll be able to adopt or where it is fit for purpose, they will certainly give that. And so again, I invite other sectors, including the media, to help present accurate information on it. Just a small little hit. And I'm sure my colleagues, both John Wadeson, Bill Gibson, Greg Farr and a range of others would be more than happy to make further statements to correct anything that may not quite be there. Transparency is important. Transparency in terms of, again, what does it really cost in terms of the implementation? That's not just in dollar costs if we're looking at just purely buying. What does it take to actually educate part of our workforce? And this is around the skilling up that we need to do collectively as well. And it's good, again, to be able to share information on that. We have an environment that we've created through my office called GovDex, where we try and present in there, in a secure manner, details about how agencies have actually applied this so that we can do better learning across government. So again, we're trying to be as responsive as we can. Our guide to open source software that we did quite a lot of work on back in 2005 has been, I think, a very good platform for us to build on. And we will look over the next period of time, through perhaps the latter period of this year, at how we can update that and include input both from our agencies and other partners who have been active in this environment. Again, a good thing for industry parties, and we've had Pia and Jeff very heavily involved and, you know, as good collaborators in what we're doing, but I'm sure they're not the only ones, and we would look to others to be able to work with us. Other parts of the comments that I'd like to just take a few moments off, and Kate, I know we're running right close to the end. I'm getting close to that part because I'd really like to be able to embrace questions and answers. But it is also around the issue of sustainability. We need to make sure that we are not creating layer upon layer upon layer of technology that makes it not only more complex to be able to manage, but either not exploiting the full value that we have through each of those implementations. That's a particularly important one. How do we best manage not only the integration, but the retirement out of former, older legacy-based activities? Standards, as I say, are important. Standards are particularly important in not only where they've come from their development point, whether it be from a proprietary basis, but how we accommodate those and make sure that we are not investing or implementing a suite of standards that is, again, making it even more demanding of us to be able to manage in our environment. Consistency, as we've seen in multiple presentations today, I think is really where we're going. And we need to continue to put our processes against that. In being able to look at the ways in which we can, in government, improve our business processes, we've got a lot of them, and we have probably far, far too many of them. The issue for us is to look at the way in which we can refine those and then look at repeatable, reusable processes. And again, these are messages that we've been hearing through the day. How can we make it simpler and then make that available for others to be able to use? Work that my colleagues in the tax agency have been doing, ATO, in looking at how any of the natural business processes that they have and require can then be exposed to the software providers to be able to embed that in the offerings, the product offerings that are coming back, not just into government, but into the other sectors that would be using that as well, back into the financial sectors, back into the other trade sectors. Really important components of it. That's where I'd like to stop because, again, I'd like to be able to engage with you and take some questions, answers, reactions from you, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
As someone who is involved with information management in the public service, I guess, what I find that AGIMO does very well is to do with setting standards for public accessible information and open rules as possible, open source server things and stuff like that. Where I feel like we don't get the support sometimes is in a basis of open standards within the department and interdepartmental stuff, open document standards, open communication standards and things like that. So a lot of our time is spent setting up systems to convert things from closed formats that we have internally into open formats that are accessible to other people. And then the other part of that, which is, even though given as a whole things stands really well, is they're all advisories or best practice guides and stuff. And it's really hard to force management to want to do those things. It's just best practice guides when there's no enforcement around those things. in?
Sure. I heard your comment this morning, and that was a very good one about some of the open formats, open document format and the like, and particularly also around websites, etc. And we do not just policy, but we actually have an operational environment that we support too. We do interactions with webmasters and others across departments and agencies. But I think there needs also to be a recognition that there's got to be a bit of responsibility taken back in the agency in their own right. So I don't want to be, the rubber mallet person. It is important to actively look at ways in which the community together we can either promote and agree, or where there are issues that need to have greater adoption principles, not just best practice, for that to come forward. So I'd really like to have a chat. Thank you.
Okay, but OOXML is going to solve all our problems.
It's one of many that will.
That is OOXML.
Okay, Kim, is it more important in government for systems to be consistent or to be competitive?
I don't see systems as being competitive. My issue is about when we go through a machinery of government change, for example, that those systems that are operating can actively form back together without having any significant disruption to the service that we're there to provide to the Australian citizen or as our interactions go to business. Where we have major customisation or major silos of systems or approaches that have been built in and hard-coded into systems, that makes it incredibly difficult for us to either be more efficient or to put change in any timely manner. That's where I've got to focus on.
I think we might have a slight nomenclature problem. One point you were talking about, I think you said open but not necessarily free. Just to understand, people such as myself, when we use the term, I think you were thinking of free as in price.
No.
I'm not thinking of free as in price. So
Nor am I. Mine is about when it's free. Some people have an interpretation that it is just free. It's not free because anything that we put in place, there's training, there's ongoing learning and development,
Right.
there's
You're
skilling,
being
etc.
So just to understand, different speakers have used the word free to mean different things.
They have.
Certainly, if you're looking at any of the comments that I made, the term free, I was using it is libre. I'm not very good at French.
Understand. Understand.
Cost.
So mine is also, what I'm saying is I don't see it and I don't interpret it as being free. Some do. I'm saying when you look at it, everything has a cost, whether it be about a cost of retainment, cost in either energy or process.
Freeze in speech rather than freeze in beer, which is the same line
Yep.
you're going
No,
there.
no, I think
Different things.
No, she's not. She's saying that it's not free as in beer, but it is free as in speech. There are products that we use as a government that are free in the fact that you can change them and open them and they're open source, but they also are the cost of the government to it.
It's a resource cost if you put it in that way. It's a people cost. It's an investment of knowledge, thinking, etc. It's in the broadest term.
Sounds to me as though you were giving a message which is very open in the commercial world within a company, which is we've looked at the packages and this one's the best. We will now do business process re-engineering to fit our business to this world's best practice software. If you were saying that, how do you fit that to the much more difficult area of multi-tiered governments and persuade the community in general and the business and the managers within government that yes, they should tailor how they go about their state or their council business or the department's business to fit that software?
Part of my comment was around such things as business processes that you would see across any tier of government. For example, there would be a registration process, there may be a payment process, there may be a review monitor process, but we either do it, and we often have the same client group at the end of it, whether or not it be an Australian citizen or a business entity, but we often develop our own unique models of that. And so the work that we're doing with our, at the first entrance, our Australian government colleagues, is to look at, do we have a model that would meet 90% of all of the agencies who would need to have that sort of process, and agree that so that the customisation is minor rather than a whole series of very different ones that weren't supporting it. And then when we look at any of the technology that we might be using as we do new developments or expose it more into an online environment, are there particular packets of software? Are there particular infrastructure issues that we may also need to use, and try and get that as a nice, streamlined, more simplified approach as well? So we start in the one circle. We have some standards and some frameworks that we've been developing up cross-jurisdictionally, but also exposing those then to our other colleagues in the, in the various sectors. For example, in either our health sector, or in our education sector, or in our benefits payments type sector, as it crosses the various jurisdictions and the other entities. So we set up like communities of practice that would be able to contribute to that and help refine our process.
Okay, we've got one there. Kate's got one and I've got one.
Okay.
A brief one. And
Yep.
what can we do to support you? What are you calling for?
I'd like to have much more engagement with my office. I look to you guys as being like my phantom army. I have a very small resource, and we work through, typical governance structures to try and ensure that we have the wonderful innovation and bright minds and input that we can get from our agency colleagues. And as far as we can, we also look to involve through either seminars or other practices other partners across both industry and other sectors.
And in terms of success stories that you've seen in open source software development by Australian government organizations, are there any examples you can tell us about, particularly where the software has been developed by one organization and further enhanced by another or modified? And to continue the question I was asking before, is there an Australian sanctioned government repository where if I developed it in local and state government, it could be found and reused by a federal government agency, that sort of thing?
Yeah. I'm not sure I can answer well enough in depth your comment about what has been built in one agency and then being multi-used elsewhere. But the examples I cited, just a few of them, and there are many more, and you'll be able to get details of those, I think, from on our website. So I prefer to go there rather than give misleading information. On your latter question about is there somewhere, that's GovDex. That's our environment. That's our repository where that information can be loaded, and it has, secure access to be able to ensure integrity of what we do have in there, to be able to share it so that people don't have to start necessarily from base zero all of the time. Share it, build on it, enhance it, and then contribute back. Bring your, your contributions, your IP or whatever else back in there as well.
My question is as much for Mike Carter as it is for you, because what I'd like him to give is a perspective of an agency being the Australian Archives and what their interaction is with AGIMO in developing standards and things that do have relevance to other agencies, and your role in disseminating that information and trying to encourage compliance, which I know is the challenge of the archives as far as document standards or electronic document archiving standards and so forth. So maybe if we could get some feedback from you about that and then get a comment from you. Sorry to be long, but I think
That's
it's
the
really
last question
important.
better than this one. Pick us for the software that's been developed in an Australian government agency and has been adopted by others and integrated into other systems. That's had a great deal of success. Our Xena software for file format determination and conversion has been picked up by the Alfresco content management people and integrated into Alfresco. Power Software, an Australian success story in software development, who do a record keeping system, they've just been bought by Hewlett-Packard. They've integrated our Xena software into a true record keeping system. And the DSpace institutional repository software that's used in a lot of universities around the world have also, in fact, we integrated Xena into that in 2 hours, I think. Very, very seamless integration into that repository system. So we designed some software which from the ground up was designed to be pluggable into other workflows, and that's been very successful. And that's been developed inside the Australian Government Agency from the outset as open source software. So in contrast to some of the suggestions this morning that somebody develops some software and then makes it open source, I really scratch my head about that. That's not open source, that's some weird thing. Open source is about the day you start development, they can see what you're doing and they can engage with either helping or at least watching what you're doing. As far as your question about the standards side of things, I'm probably the wrong person from the National Archives to answer that because my role is very much in the technical implementation of making this stuff happen.
The archives win some flash award for your metadata standards developed as well.
Yeah, and that's they did,
Sorry.
but that's
Bit of a
really,
Dorothy.
that's true. That's true, but the area that I work in, we're in a very different area of development, so we don't do the standards development part of it. So although I know a little bit about that, I think I'll be making a ill-informed response for it. I'll leave that alone.
I think it's very important in terms of the other part of Kate's question about, so what do we do? Well, we work closely with who we identify as the expert in that particular area. So metadata is important. Archives has skill sets to be able to do it. We either host environments or we co-publish or we co-engage with a range of departments and agencies. So, and it was really important when we were talking this morning about licensing products or putting information out in that environment, unless you put the metadata out so that there's accurate, reliable interpretation of it, it is more dangerous than actually not having access to it. So I think it's really important that the level of preparedness, and you're probably never going to be able to say, well, look, it's absolutely, 90 or 100%, but the level of preparedness prior to actually exposing that out is absolutely critical. And in fact, it goes to the integrity not only of the overall open source process, but how we actually provide information and support it long term.
Okay. I've got a question.
Okay.
So we heard earlier on how the lawyers took the lead from the computer nerds on Creative Commons and to do that. It strikes me that you could use GovDex to write government policy, like people collaborating. Could the computer nerds teach the policy people in government how to better develop policy by consulting each other and working together? And all of that? Because I used to work in policy in government, I could never figure out. I kept looking for the manual, on how to do this well, and it never seemed to be there. Could you invite people to come into your system and write the policy?
That's an interesting challenge, Tom. Thank you for that. And I'm not sure it's a no. But maybe it's also, a rather nice educational one, social policy or policy building 101.
Policy building 101, I'll get right onto it.
Okay.
The National Archives 101. And here, I think we'll have to cut it off here, and so you can have the last question.
Are you cutting off after I speak?
After the answer.
Okay, cool. Right, that's even better. First of all, I just want to say, probably for everyone, that I personally think the work that you've done over the past 6 years has been really good, and I think there's a great level of skills in there, and hopefully we'll continue to do and improve on the things we're doing in this. But I do want to ask, the thing I've found with dealing with lots of people in government is very similar to the worse than the education issue of siloing. That everyone's doing their own thing, no one knows what anyone else is doing. I've actually, in many cases, played a personification of the kids in government by linking things together that I know and things that they don't have a mechanism. I've always seen AGIMO as, and I always point people to AGIMO as the place to go and talk about open source, which is my sort of area. But I see AGIMO as possibly planned integrated on understanding what Australia talks about, and certainly using technology to do this, to actually provide that function of collaboration and linking agencies up so that they can be more efficient, rather than deal and work with together.
Thank you, Pia, and that's exactly, part of what my role is, and I have thousands of cats that I try and keep herded and working together in that part. And we do it by multiple of ways, but it never stops, and it's just a constant process for that. We continue to look at ways in which we can be alert to, but also push, promote, etc. It will be an ongoing challenge. So, thank you.